Welcome to Finding Home Healing. I'm your host, Sadie. I believe you were born with a light that guides you to your higher self and most passionate life. But for many of us, it's been extinguished or lost. My mission is to help you find your way back home to that light so that you can love deeper, live in your power, and truly thrive. For those lost or lonely souls, welcome home. Welcome to the Finding Home Healing podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about highly sensitive people, otherwise known as HSPs. I work with a lot of people who don't know that they're HSPs, and when they find out, when we start working together, it completely revolutionizes their life in a good way. This episode will be really transformative for you if you already know that you're an HSP or if you fit the criteria for being a highly sensitive person, which I'm going to go over right now. You may be a highly sensitive person if you feel drained or overwhelmed in this world that is too loud, too fast, too stimulating, and too intense. If other people's moods affect you. If you feel frazzled and disorganized a lot, like startling easily or feeling overwhelmed by bright lights, strong smells, coarse fabrics, or sirens nearby. If you find it unpleasant when too much is going on around you all at once. Or if you've been told that you're sensitive or shy. I'm really excited to dive into this topic today as it is very near and dear to my heart. And I say that it's near and dear to my heart because I spent so much of my life feeling very misunderstood, feeling highly sensitive to everything around me, whether it was food, my environment, my family, emotions, anything and everything that you could think of that we just have stimulation over or about, I was sensitive to it. And my family didn't know how to handle that. They didn't know what that even meant. They didn't know that, when I was outside and they were branding cattle, and bless their souls and hearts, I know that that's important. And I come from a rancher farmer background. But when we were having to tag the ears and vaccinate and castrate and all of these things that are important for us to be able to have food in the world, it was really, really hard for me, like traumatic. It was so hard for me. I could feel the animals and their experience and the pain. I could tune into all of the people that were there and all of their experiences and all of their thoughts and all of the moms who were mooing. And it's like, that's a really dramatic example, but that was a moment in time in my childhood that was so hard for me and so traumatic because I'm so sensitive that I just couldn't shut off my receptors. I couldn't just be okay with the fact that that was happening. And there's multiple examples of that, even just in school. Like when there would be too many kids yelling or talking when we were on a break, like it was so overwhelming to me. When I was in high school, I had to, on any breaks, whether it was lunch break, whether it was before school started or after school started, I had to leave the campus if I could, or go to a hallway where there was no people. Like I couldn't go eat in the cafeteria. It was way too loud, way too echoey. I didn't know it at the time, but I was way too overstimulated. There was way too much sound, too much activity going on and happening. It was just too much for me. And I was never able to express what that meant to me or how it was impacting me. And so therefore my family didn't really understand it and they couldn't help me. And it just turned into this really, really unfortunate cycle where I was just the way that I was. I was extremely anxious, very socially anxious. I didn't like going many places. I was really negative and angry, and I complained a lot, and I was just really negative. I was just angry at the world and at everybody in it, like really, really mad, because I just felt so misunderstood, so invalidated, and so unheard. Well, come to find out, later on in my 20s, I discover this thing that Dr. Elaine Aron, thank God for her, discovered, which is the highly sensitive person. A highly sensitive person is different than a non-highly sensitive person at a genetic and physiological level. This is not just a psychological thing. It's not just a therapy thing. It's not a mental disorder. It's not a disease of any kind. It's not autism. It doesn't happen through life. It's not like something you develop. It is something you are born with. It is an inborn trait, just like I have brown hair and I have the color of skin that I have. Like, that is something that I'm born with. Being a highly sensitive person is the same. It is something that you are born with. It's a difference in your brain and your nervous system and how those parts of you process information and stimuli, and how you interact with the environment around you. It's really fascinating, actually. They've done studies that highly sensitive traits are not just segregated to humans. It's actually found in hundreds of different animal species. And biologists have actually found that it is a evolutionary adaptation for that species, that they have 20% of their population with this highly sensitive iteration in their genetics in order to actually keep that species alive. So highly sensitive people and other species are a really integral part of the species for survival and for existence in general, which is really cool because in my world and in my opinion, or at least what I've experienced up until my 20s, that highly sensitive people are often the ones that are looked down upon or that are lesser than or seem to have less advantages in the world, just because being in a world with such high stimulation and overwhelming crap is really hard to be us in that world. So we often, and I say we because I work with a lot of highly sensitive people, and it's not just me that I find this in. I find this in many HSPs, not all of them, but a lot of them, that because we have this thing that we're sensitive to a lot of stuff, we hide ourselves. We are recluses. We're more introverted. We don't want to be around a lot of people or go out into the world and like just be a salesperson or just, be extremely social or go to bars or loud restaurants. Like, I find that a lot of us, even like I have highly sensitive people that live in New York. So it doesn't mean that everyone that is like this lives out in the middle of nowhere, but there is a challenge that we face in those more stimulating environments. But what I want to bring to light today is not only that this exists, that those who might resonate with this message might feel some validation or feel some sense of being seen or understood, like how I didn't feel for a majority of my life up until I found out this information, which literally transformed and revolutionized the way that I saw myself, the way that I felt about myself. Like, I want that for you too. I want you to feel that sense of validation that there's nothing wrong with you, first of all. First and foremost, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you, and that your sensitivity can be your superpower. That is my biggest message at the end of the day. And I want the fact that your sensitivity is a superpower to genuinely be embodied by you so that you can use your sensitivity to your advantage, because there are a lot of advantages to it, and not just be abused by it, right? With our extremely highly overwhelming and stimuli like galore society, right? Okay, so questions that I often find that highly sensitive people are asking themselves are, why do I feel so different than everyone else? Why do I feel like I don't fit in, or I'm the black sheep? Why am I more sensitive to other people and their feelings, and I can't focus on myself, or I put others ahead of myself? It's almost like I forget about myself. Why do I do that? Why do I people please? Why am I the peacekeeper? Why am I wanting everyone else around me to be in harmony and to be, working together and to be happy so that I feel better? That's not always just a highly sensitive person thing. I want to caveat that those are other coping mechanisms and survival patterns that we develop through childhood. So these questions aren't always what highly sensitive people ask themselves, but I find more often than not, at least in my practice, that often highly sensitive people are concurrently facing certain patterns like the people pleaser and the peacemaker role and all of that. The empath, really, because the empath is very far on one side of the highly sensitive person spectrum. If you think of it like a a spectrum where there's a non-highly sensitive person all the way over to the other side of the spectrum where there's the highest of highly sensitive person. That's what we would call an empath. So if you already know that you're an empath, then you're also a highly sensitive person. If you're not an empath, you could still be on the sensitivity spectrum in what would be considered a highly sensitive person, but not so far to the point where you're empathic, where you're able to actually be in the feeling of someone else's feeling, if that makes sense. And we'll talk about empaths in a little bit, but just to be clear about that. HSPs are also asking themselves, why doesn't anyone understand me or just get me? I feel so alone. I feel isolated. I feel like there's nobody here in this world that gets me or that can relate to me or that thinks the way I think or that has experiences the way that I experience them. It can feel very isolating and very lonely. HSPs also ask themselves, why do I feel like I need a break from people and life? Even people that I love and love to be around, maybe best friends, romantic partners, family members, coworkers, whoever like that you love being around. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, I need to be alone. I need space from these people. I need to just go be a recluse and shut down everything and be in a dark room where nobody can see me, talk to me, or touch me or get to me. I find that HSPs are also asking themselves like why the world feels so overwhelming to them. Because like I said earlier, there's a lot of stimulation, especially in our society now. This maybe wasn't as big of a problem in the 1900s, even up to the 2000s, where we didn't have computers really in every household. We didn't have handheld electronics like iPhones and iPads and all the fancy things, right? Androids too, obviously phones, like handheld cellular devices. We didn't have social media. We didn't have our email. Like, think about it. I was born in the 90s and we didn't have email then. Like some people did for work, obviously, but at a general sense, like a normal everyday person or household, they didn't have email. So they didn't get pinged every 5 seconds. They didn't have text messages or the ability to call someone when they were out and about in the world. It is crazy how much we have changed over the last 30 to 50 years, like crazy. So it makes sense that a lot of us, highly sensitive people, are finding that it's not that we're struggling more, but the fact that we're different's being highlighted more. So there's also a lot of times that I find the HSPs are asking themselves, like, is there anything positive about the fact that I have more sensitivity to stuff? Because so far it seems like it's very negative and it's not a very good thing and I don't like it and I wish that it would go away. I found myself wishing for that many, many times, but over the course of me accepting this about myself and really empowering myself to see my sensitivity as a superpower, I was able to discover lots of positive things. And I do have to caveat that was very much due to Dr. Elaine Aron's work. She wrote the book, The Highly Sensitive Person, which I highly recommend. She was really good about helping see how a high sensitivity is actually helpful and how it can be a very good thing. So thank you to her. She's been the mother of this world, and she psychoanalyst, PhD. She just is a genius and has done so much to help all of us. So really want to bring a shout out and thank you to her. So you might be asking yourself, okay, what is an HSP and how do I know if I am one? So I'm sure that you can gather so far, if you don't know already, an HSP, a highly sensitive person, is somebody who, like I said earlier, has that difference in their brain and nervous system that makes it such that they process information differently, they receive and sense information differently and sometimes more. For instance, like if somebody is observing the front of a house and a non-HSP sees, a garage door and a window, they'd say, oh yeah, that house has a garage door, a door, and a window. But a highly sensitive person might say, well, there's 2 shutters on 2 of the windows, and there's a slight variation in the shade of green that's on this side and the lighter green that's over here underneath this window. And there's actually a little ding in the garage that I noticed, and the lights were off. So you get the picture, right? Like a non-highly sensitive person is still obviously picking up on stimulation, but a highly sensitive person is picking up on so much more information, which is why it's required of them to have to process that information more and have more time to be able to process that information. So there's that. Highly sensitive people also have higher empathy. Like I said, the empath, right? HSPs aren't necessarily empaths, but all empaths are HSPs. They have higher empathy. They're able to feel other people's feelings more, understand emotions a little bit more inherently and more deeply. They also feel emotions more deeply. They have what Dr. Elaine Aron refers to as emotional reactivity. They have a higher reaction to their own emotions and to other people's emotions, which again, once we learn to manage and take that into consideration as ourselves, then we can use that to our benefit. Like, I'll give you another example for me. I used to not be able to manage my feelings at all whatsoever. I was so all over the board. I was chaotic. We thought I was bipolar, or that I was just like, I had depression and anxiety swings, and that I was just a psych case, essentially. And thank God for my sister and my parents and me, because we have a belief in alternative medicine, that we don't necessarily just go straight to medication or antibiotics or to even like the psychiatrist. So I'm so very thankful and grateful that we didn't go that route, because I work with a lot of people and I know a lot of people that do go that route, which all the power to them. But I do find that medicating highly sensitive people is not the thing to do. It is not the right choice, in my opinion, unless there's other things going on. Because a highly sensitive person, what you're doing when you're medicating yourself is you're essentially just shutting yourself off. You're so disconnected from yourself. You don't know up from down, left from right. You can't follow your passion. You don't have any connection to your feelings, what's really genuine and true. Like, I have a couple of clients that they have needed to be on medication, and I support that. They have their doctors and their support team that has helped them make those empowering decisions for themselves. However, I do notice that it is more difficult for them to connect to life. They have this wall in between them and everything else and everyone else around them. So going back to my story, I didn't go down that route, which I'm very grateful for. I used alternative medicine therapies like homeopathy, and that helped me start learning to like balance some of my emotional moods. And then again, once I learned about highly sensitive people, I was going through this path and this journey of healing a lot of my trauma. And I realized that, I have all these really intense emotions just because that's part of who I am. That's my nature. And literally even just accepting that about myself and feeling validated that that's okay, that I have that and that that's normal, it started getting much more manageable because I allowed myself to just feel my feelings whenever I needed to feel something. If I needed to cry, if I needed to scream into a pillow, if I needed to go to the gym and work out my anger, I started having healthier outlets to be able to not only recognize my feelings, but to feel my feelings and then to let them go, which I actually ended up developing a whole process called emotional digestion, which helps people, just like your digestive system in your body, it helps people digest emotions so that you can extract the nutrients, aka the positive parts and the positive learnings of the emotions that you have, and then be able to let go of the rest, just like how you excrete waste from your digestive system, right? It's very similar. So that process of being able to digest your emotions for highly sensitive people is so important. If you are just accumulating more and more and more of your emotions and of your feelings, you're gonna explode. It's like the pressure is building, and eventually that pop that top is gonna pop off, and then you're gonna have a mess. So that happens actually sometimes. I've worked with people in the past. I had this one client, and bless her heart, I love her to death. And she had a really difficult time in her relationships because she wouldn't process her feelings. She wouldn't let herself feel her feelings. She would bury them and stuff them and dig them into this little tiny spot inside of her existence where she thought that they went away, but they never actually did. And they would build and build and build. And then she would have a blow up in her relationship. And it just was cyclical. It kept happening over and over again because it would accumulate just like anything would, and then she would explode. And it was really hard on her partner, and her partner couldn't handle it. And so her relationship was really volatile, and they didn't have the peace and the serenity and the easygoing, like meandering path that they both really wanted in relationship. So she came to me with that picture of herself and of the relationship. And once I showed her not only that she's validated in having the feelings that she had, because at first she didn't think that she was allowed to feel anything. She came from a background and a family where emotions just weren't allowable, like they just weren't welcome. And so once I validated her that her feelings are okay, she's allowed to have her anger, her sadness, her hurt, her guilt, her shame, her embarrassment, her fear, all of that was allowed, and it all had permission. Even just that in an instant brought an immense amount of relief to her. And then when I would see her, we would process some of those feelings together. So she would tell me about what she's afraid of and what made her feel really sad, and some of the areas that she feels hurt. And I would coach her through those and help do some release processes and get rid of those feelings that she doesn't need anymore, extract the positive parts of those feelings, the learnings. And then, like, again, with the digestive system, letting go of the excrements. And when she learned that process, again, 10 pounds of weight lifted off of her, all of this pressure lifted off of her. And she eventually started having a little bit more of a balanced, stable relationship with her partner. So I also taught her how to communicate properly. So not only identifying her feelings and then being able to feel those feelings, now she started to be able to communicate her feelings in a conscious way, in a way where she wasn't communicating when she was feeling the feelings, but she would go through a process of identifying what was upsetting her, processing them out of her body and her space, and then letting them go, and being able to share later or share when she's in a more calm, centered, and balanced place what her feelings really were with her partner, and share about what upset her, what hurt her, and be able to make powerful requests for her partner to treat her a different way or to handle a situation in a different way. And literally, even though that sounds like a lot, it really wasn't. And the simplicity of just recognizing your feelings, expressing them, and communicating them, it was a night and day difference for her. Like, her relationship completely transformed. She transformed as a person. And even though as a highly sensitive person, she still had a lot of emotions, she now had a way to handle those emotions. She had a place to put them, to process them. She would give herself time to go on walks and go around the trees and be in nature to help support her in that process of processing her emotions. So that was a really, really beautiful success story. And she's been thriving ever since she learned those things. That's what happens with highly sensitive people, is they maybe aren't thriving because they aren't getting what they need. They're like a plant. I was actually just talking to one of my friends the other day who called me, and he's like, I think that my wife's a highly sensitive person. What do I do? And bless his heart, I am so happy that he called me. And I was like, you know what? Highly sensitive people are like plants. They need a certain amount of sunlight, they need a certain amount of nutrients, and they need some TLC. And literally, if you just give them what they need, they will thrive. It's not like they're really difficult to be around or take care of or to tend to. It's like, once you have the formula for what a highly sensitive person needs, specifically either yourself or someone that you're in a relationship with, once you have their formula, like, they're different, everyone's different. I'm talking in generalities today, but Everyone's different. Everyone's going to need different things. Once you figure out that formula, then highly sensitive people are like bomb.com. They are so amazing. They're so in touch and so in tune. They're so creative. They're so like in their body a lot of times. If they haven't learned to get out of their head and in their processing and into their body, then that's one thing. But they teach us how to observe the beauty around us and how to appreciate little things. And they really bring like a zest and a life to life in all ways. They bring a richness, right? Like if you are not an HSP and you're in relationship with an HSP, that HSP is bringing so much more depth to the relationship. They're bringing so much vitality and vibrancy if those specific needs that they have are being met. If they're not, then they will literally be like a dead plant. They will shrivel up and die, and they will hate their lives and not be connected to their passion. They will be mopey. They might be depressed or anxious. They might have addiction problems. The list goes on, right? And this is for everybody. Like when everybody has what they need, then they thrive. But I'm talking specifically about HSPs. I want you to think about them like they're plants. And if you are the HSP, I want you to think about yourself like a plant. This is actually an exercise that I do with people that's really fun and very informative. If somebody comes to me and I help them discover that they're a highly sensitive person, then depending on that person, I might have them go get a plant and take care of that plant. They fertilize it. They have to water it, obviously, make sure that it's getting the sunlight that it requires. And it's not complicated, it's not hard, but it does take attention. It does take a little bit of effort. It might take a shift in lifestyle or something that they might not have been used to before, but it helps them be able to externalize and see in 3D, in reality, what it's like when you actually give something what it needs, even though it's simple, and how that can change the outcome, right? This would not be an exercise for somebody who travels all the time or hates plants or whatever, but you get the gist. It's a fun little exercise if you want to try that out yourself, to just see what it's like taking care of a creature that you are like. Okay, so we've talked about highly sensitive people. If you don't know that you are one, there is a quiz that either you can Google it, it's highly sensitive person quiz. There's one from Oprah and there's one from Dr. Elaine Aron. Either one's fine. They're very much the same, similar, if not exactly the same. I can't remember, but there's two sources to take a quiz. I would like to make a quiz one day. That's still in my queue. I will have one eventually. But you can go take a quiz and it will give you a number on a range of where you land on the sensitivity spectrum. If you are on the spectrum of where a highly sensitive person is considered, then you would more likely than not probably be a highly sensitive person and vice versa. So that's a really fun and easy way to go find out if you are one. Once you find out if you are one, then you're like, oh my God, okay, this is either really exciting or really terrifying. That's totally cool. I love that. And all feelings are welcome. If you're terrified, don't worry. There are tons of resources available now. There are people that are talking about it more. It's becoming a more well-known thing, which is very exciting. There's people on Instagram and TikTok. I was on TikTok once. I do have a lot of videos to help support highly sensitive people on finding home healing on TikTok and Instagram. So you can go there. Also, you can read Dr. Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person, and The Highly Sensitive Person in Love. So those are ways to go get resources. I also built a course around specifically helping highly sensitive people. You can find that at findinghomehealing.com. It should be /course. There's a section there where you can read a little bit about what I have in the course, but essentially what I'm doing is helping HSPs turn their superpower of sensitivity into a superpower, right? Instead of it being an Achilles heel. So turning the sensitivity into a superpower. It's going to teach you how to process information. It's going to teach you how to consciously communicate with people that you're in relationship with. It's going to teach you that emotional digestion process that I mentioned earlier. It's going to teach you how to take care of your body and how to explore your spirituality and your belief system. It's going to validate you in all the ways that you are, hopefully even more so even than just this podcast. And the goal there is to really just help you feel like you're not alone. So if you want to go there, check that out. It's, in my opinion, really great and super helpful. But I was the one who made it, so it's a bias. But I have had a lot of clients and people test it for me and take it and be like, this is so amazing. This is so helpful. I can't believe that I am just now finding out about this information. So feel free to go there, findinghomehealing.com/course. Now, I'm going to go over a little bit more in depth around highly sensitive people and what it's like to be one, so that those of you who are one are feeling really validated and seen and heard and not alone, and hopefully give you some information that will be helpful for you in your day-to-day living life and in your career, in your lifestyle, and with your partner. So, like I had mentioned earlier, there is an acronym that Dr. Elaine Aron came up with that is DOES, does, and she explains how it represents, that it stands for depth of processing is the D. O is overstimulation / overwhelm. I call it overwhelm. E is emotional reactivity or empathy, and S is sensing the subtle stimuli. Now, I am not here to just, completely just talk about Dr. Elaine Aron's book, but that is a source that I learned a lot of this from. So I really want to make sure I'm giving her the credit. And if you want to go learn more, please feel free. Her book is great. But my understanding, and again, this is through my lens, so I might not have the full depth of understanding, but this is through my lens, and being an HSP my whole life, coaching highly sensitive people and reading her books and becoming more of an expert on this topic, I have learned that depth of processing, really what it boils down to is the fact that we have a lot of information in our brains and in our bodies, and that stuff needs to be processed. If you don't know what that means, the best way for me to describe it is like your computer and how all of its apps are running, and it has a processor, and the computer that you buy will have a different power of processor. You as a highly sensitive people need like the highest power of processing that you can get. The way that I like to process, which again, this is such a distillation, there's so much more to it, so don't take this as the whole picture, but the way that I like to handle my processing needs is I will go on a walk outside and I will just let my brain dump. I coach clients with this a lot. I will have them either do it before bed or going on a walk or potentially at the gym or in the car. In some way, shape, or form, some state where you're in more of a flow state or like an alpha brainwave, more of like a hypnotic state, like a calm and relaxed state. Sometimes I even do it when I'm doing dishes. But what I do is that sometimes I'll also lay down actually, if I'm not wanting to do a physical motion like walking or doing the dishes or gardening or driving my car, then I'll just lay down. And it's not technically a meditation, which is a different avenue to go down, right? Because the goal of meditation is to not think. The goal of processing, in the way that I think of it, is to actually think more. It's to allow your brain to just go and to just dump everything that's in it and everything that you're thinking about and all of the stuff that has been clogged and jammed up inside of you. Some people find it really helpful too, that I coach with this, to write it down, kind of like what you would do in a brain dump, where you're just literally either writing or typing the things that are coming to you without complete sentences, without even having there make any sense, without there being any sense made by the words that you're saying or writing. Sometimes you can do it in an audio if you are more auditory and you want to talk out loud, if you're an external processor. My sister's so cute. She always comes to me and is like, I need to externally process. And I'm that way too. I like to externally process, but we do that for each other where we hold space and she can just talk and talk and go, and I'll just listen, and she'll do the same for me. But if you're alone and you don't have somebody to externally process to, and you are an external processor, then this method can be really, really helpful. Again, you're writing stuff down as it's coming through your brain. There's no complete sentences. There's no judgment. You're not trying to accomplish anything. You're not trying to write anything specifically. It's just for the goal and the purpose of getting it out of you. It's like you're emptying the trash. Okay, so that depth of processing trait that highly sensitive people have, again, I really just think of it like your system is getting clogged up like a drain, and you just got to go in and clear it out. And those are some of the ways I like to clear it out best. Again, there's so much more to these topics. As a highly sensitive person, it's killing me that I can't go even more deep into each topic, but I only have a certain allotted time. So doing my best to give you the high level that's really going to impact you and be helpful for you. Okay, so overstimulation, that's the second one. Boy, I have so much to say about overstimulation. Oh, it's so funny that we live in a world, again, like I was mentioning in the beginning, where we have these handheld devices and we have social media, and there's literally, if you look at your phone, just look at it from an outsider's perspective, like think about yourself being an alien and like a phone is brand new to you. If you look at a phone, there are so many colors, there are so many words, there are so many shapes and styles of different things. It is insane. If you look at like your app list, and forgive me, Android users, I have an iPhone, so I don't know a lot about Androids, but I'm sure it's the same. I've seen Android phones, and to be quite honest, they look extremely overwhelming to me and really overstimulating. But if you just think about how simple life was before we had a handheld device, electronic device, and now having that as just a normal part of our existence, it's almost like an appendage. It's like a third hand, and we always have it around us. It is so overstimulating. It is so overwhelming. Like a lot of times, I just can't even be near my phone. I want to go into the wilderness. I want it turned off. I don't even want to be near it physically. I'm like, I need a break from this thing. And all I want to do is look at trees and grass and vegetation, and that's it. I don't want anything else. So overstimulation is really happening on a frequent basis, and you may or may not be aware of it because you might have become so numb to how stimulated you are on a daily basis. I have a lot of highly sensitive people clients, HSP clients, that can't sleep at night. And I start digging around and I'm like, okay, what is your bedroom setup like? What were you doing before bed? What are you thinking about before bed? Like all of these things to just get a better picture of how much stimulation they're getting. And lo and behold, most of the time they have been on social media or they're on their phone, they're watching YouTube videos. They're watching movies, which nowadays the 6-second cut that they have with every scene, so stimulating. That's how they get you addicted to stuff, because our brains are 3 and 6 second cuts right now. That's why social media is like so fast and everything is just like scroll, show me more, like make it loud and colorful and, you know, all these different captions and it's like so much, right? But that's how our brains are addicted to stuff, because we like want fast moving things. If you think about your survival brain, the reptilian brain, like we were bred, if you will, to be able to go hunt, maybe not women as much, but in a general sense, the human species was bred to hunt and look for fast moving things out on the plains or in the mountains or whatever. And so our attention is captured by very fast moving things. And unfortunately, things like social media and our electronics have capitalized on that fact. And they really not only attract our attention, but for highly sensitive people, it attracts our attention and then gives us an input that is extremely high of information. So in my course, I talk about how we are absorbing all this information, right? Like I was talking about with depth of processing. And overstimulation is really just a symptom of the fact that our senses are so sensitive. Like, we're absorbing so much more information than a non-highly sensitive person, that information is coming at us like at rapid speed, and our brains are able to kind of internalize it and interpret it. But at some point we get burned out. So highly sensitive people get more burned out. They feel more tired and overwhelmed if they're not managing their stimulation and their overwhelm. Overwhelm can come from a lot of different things, whether it's stimulation or it's emotions, it's feelings. Like, highly sensitive people can get really overwhelmed even just with their own feelings or with feeling someone else's feelings. And more often than not, the symptomology of overwhelm is just feeling really tired and sluggish and lethargic and like brain dead, brain fogged. Like, there might be other physical things going on that are creating symptoms like that. But I have found that when I'm so overwhelmed and overstimulated, I am just tired. I'm like, I don't want anything to do with anyone or anything. I just want to go lay down in a dark room with nothing and no one. I'm burnt out. I just can't. And it happens on a daily basis. Okay, so overstimulation, that's a thing. The third part of the acronym, the DOES acronym, is E, which is emotional reactivity, or in other words, like empathy. Those are two of the same things, but they're also very different. So if you don't know what an empath is, please go look it up, or I'll have a podcast about it here eventually. But essentially, you are able to feel other people's feelings and take them on as your own. Every client that I have that's an empath, I teach them care, not carry. It is your job to care. It is not your job to carry. So let it go. And I coach them through that whole process and how to do that. I have another exercise that I teach them and coach them through called bubble building. And what that's really helping do is strengthen your boundary around your body and around your energetic field so that you have more power with what's coming in and what's going out energetically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually, right? Spiritually has been a big part for me, and I'll talk about that in another episode. But the empathicness of being a highly sensitive person means that our boundaries as an energy field and as a body are much more permeable, meaning things can come in and out of them. They are not so rigid, which is why if you have non-highly sensitive people around you and you're like, why do they just not feel the same things that I feel? Why are they not picking up on that person and their anger or even noticing it? Because they have stronger boundaries, and that's a beautiful gift. And as highly sensitive people with our empathy, we also have a special gift where we have more compassion. We're able to be more nurturing and more caring and kind and aware, and people really appreciate that and really love that. In the work that I do, you can probably imagine that it's difficult for me to disconnect myself from someone else's feelings, especially if we're talking about trauma or like they're really heavy, deep emotions. But I've really been able to master this experience of bubble building, which I started many, many, many years ago. And what that's been able to do for me and people I teach it to is to have those stronger boundaries so that other people that you're around or that you're experiencing are not impacting you to the point where you feel like you're crumbling or where you feel like you can't be yourself or live in your own world, in your own space, like you're not being crowded, right? Sometimes I hear that feedback from people that as highly sensitive people, they get this feeling like they're crowded. And there ends up being just a lot of people's energy in their bubble and in their space. And so I help them go clear it out and cleanse it out so that it's just them. So that the only voice they're hearing is theirs, and the only feelings they're feeling are theirs, and the only things that they're in tune with are their own. Okay, so that emotional boundaries and empathy is so huge. This is really important in relationships too, because if you I'm trying to think of an example that's happened recently. But let's say, okay, so my partner and I, we just got off the mountain. We were in the wilderness. It was wonderful. And I could feel that he hit a wall right when we came into town. And I was feeling impacted by it. And I'm like, ugh, we just had such a great trip. This was so fun. I'm feeling down now because nothing changed for me, but I could feel his energy was it just like fell off a cliff. And I'm like, hey, like what's going on? What happened? Why are you not feeling the happy and joy that we just were like 15 minutes ago? And instead of like really letting that drop me all the way down to the point where I was upset and I was having emotions around it, I was like, oh, I recognized, okay, that's his emotion, that's his feeling. Let's just get curious and ask some more questions about it. Like, are you feeling tired? Are you drained? Are you upset? Da, da, da. Did something happen on your phone that like stressed you out or whatever? And it was just that he was tired. He didn't sleep very well when we were in the tent. So I was able to allow myself to separate from that experience and that feeling instead of really letting it eat me alive and just be really upset that that was happening. Right? So again, in relationships, even in business, I mean, especially in business, I work with a client who is really high up in one of the Fortune 500 companies. She's basically being prepped and primed to be one of the like top management leaders in that company. And she's an empath, a highly sensitive person. And it is really, really difficult for her to be able to shut off all of the feelings of people that she's serving and that she's supporting and that come to her with problems and that are looking to her for guidance and for leadership and that are getting upset with her when she's trying to roll new things out. Like there's just so much there. And I'm teaching her the process of bubble building and emotional digestion and how to have stronger, less permeable boundaries so that she's not taking on everyone else's crap and then carrying it around with her all day and then collapsing when she gets home. Okay, so that's really important for HSPs. Let's see. I talked about emotional digestion. Again, that's also a very helpful process. It's important to note that HSPs have different needs than non-HSPs. So I'm not trying to create separation or segregation here by being like, you're in this camp and I'm in this camp. That means we are separate beings. It's just that like somebody with short hair has different needs than somebody with long hair. They need different shampoo. They need different types of brushes. They need different hair ties. For you gentlemen out there, I'll give an analogy for you too. They need different lengths of times of haircuts. Like someone with short hair who wants to maintain short hair, they have to get their hair cut a lot. Somebody with long hair like mine can go months and months and months, maybe even years without getting a haircut. So it's not that we're different necessarily. It's just that there are needs that some have that others don't. For men, it would be like if you have a beard or not. If you have a beard, you have to go get a beard trim like every couple of weeks. If you don't have a beard, then you might have to be shaving with a razor every single morning, or maybe you're not growing facial hair. That's totally fine too. But whatever it is, right? Like I want to normalize the fact that it's okay that we have different needs. It doesn't mean that we're separate or that we have to hate one or the other, right? I'm really trying here to integrate everybody to understand each other more, not separate them more. I always tell people like a lot of the self-help world and the personal development world, at least in my opinion and in my experience, has had the intention of trying to change you or trying to change people. And that's really not my goal. My intention is to help you integrate. Not change per se, but better understand, better love, better accept, better integrate and bring together in unity so that you can be more of who you are. That's really my ultimate dream and goal for every single person. So with that being said, HSPs and non-HSPs, they're not in different camps. We just have different needs. And HSP needs revolve around what I've been talking about with depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional reactivity, and empathy. Those traits that we have require us to have different sets of needs. Okay, so it's important if you are an HSP to get really clear around what your particular needs are. If you need to have alone time, like 20 minutes every day, and you have a house full of screaming children, you need to tell your husband, your partner, your wife, whatever, that you need 20 minutes of alone time every day. That was one of the suggestions I gave my friend that called me the other day. He was like, what do I do to support my wife? And I tuned into her and I was like, you know what? It feels like she never has alone time. Like she never gets to be alone. Even if the kids are napping, she's doing stuff. Like she's always active. And that is death to a highly sensitive person. If there's not time to just sit down and chill and not do anything, but be able to just let the brain do its thing and process, then like I said earlier, that's going to accumulate and it's going to be very overwhelming. So she needed some alone time, right? I was giving him suggestions like, have her go take a bath. Be like, babe, I got the kids, I got dinner, you go take a bath, or I'm going to clean up the dishes, you go have some alone time, right? That's really important for people that are in relationship with HSPs, or for you as an HSP. It's really important that you learn to assert your needs in certain ways. Like my sister, she's on the HSP spectrum, and she's very, very diligent about getting self-care. She will take a break from her family and from her home, and she will go out and she'll get acupuncture or get a massage, or she'll go even just to a cafe and get a smoothie by herself so that she has time. She's not really typically one that likes to be alone. She's very extroverted and very social, but sometimes she likes to have those moments where it's just her being tended to and nurtured. I'm the same way. I sometimes love driving in the car by myself. I sit there in silence and I just let my brain do that thingy, that like brain dump where I just process and let it all go and let it all out, just mentally, right? If you're an HSP, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you're not, it might be a little bit confusing, but really knowing and understanding what those needs are for you is really, really valuable. Okay, so the final thing in that acronym DOES, is sensing the subtle stimuli, right? What this means is sort of what I've been talking about before, where we are very, very sensitive to stimuli. We can pick up on a lot of things, whatever we're seeing, what we're hearing, what we're feeling, what we're smelling, what we're tasting. Like I am so sensitive to the clothes that I wear that more often than not, I'm in very relaxed, sometimes very loose, or if it's form-fitting, like it's very soft material, which has been really challenging lately because I'm really trying to avoid plastic clothes, like all the rayons and spandex and elastic stuff, and go more towards cotton and hemp and all of that. But in a general sense, like I am always looking for clothes that I feel really comfortable in. I cannot stand being in clothes that are scratchy or rough, or like being in jeans. I can do it for a little bit, but I'm like, oh my God, I cannot wait to get out of these because I'm just not comfortable. Like I'm so sensitive to touch, right? And I love textures. I'm obsessed with pillows. I'm obsessed with soft things and with blankets, and just like, I love cuddling up and getting so cozy and touching things. Like oh my God, that's so funny. I went to a Best Buy once. This was a long time ago. And my immediate reaction in the Best Buy was that I got so overwhelmed by all of the things in the Best Buy, but that's typical now that you know how HSPs get overwhelmed so easily. But I could not stop touching the buttons. I love touching buttons, and I know everyone makes fun of me for the way I say buttons because I pronounce the T's in the middle of the word, but I love buttons. Like, oh my God, touching all of the things on all of the electronics was so satisfying to me. And up until I learned that HSPs can be sensitive with touch, I was like, this is a really weird thing that I can't let anybody know about me just because of how bizarre it is. But I'm obsessed with touching things. So textures are really, really big for me, which is interesting, and it's helpful to understand this because if you're a parent and you have a child that's an HSP and they are not wanting to eat certain foods, it could be that they're very sensitive to those textures. When I was a kid, I couldn't even touch fruit. I hated fruit, hated it. And everybody around me ate fruit. My family loved fruit. My sister was obsessed with fruit. We were like complete opposites. My grandma would like can apples, and she would make applesauce and rhubarb jam and cherry pie, and she was all into that. And I hated it. I was never open to even trying it. All I ate when I was a kid was like cereal, macaroni and cheese, cream of wheat, and occasionally some meat. But other than that, like I didn't like the texture of vegetables. I hated fruit. It was terrible. Bless my mom. She tried so hard to feed us well, and I just didn't ever want to eat it, and it drove her nuts. But it's this texture thing, like okra. I can't stand that food. I can't. It's too slimy and disgusting. I was just talking to a friend a week or so ago, and we were just shooting the information back and forth to one another around the things that we didn't like touching. And she didn't like seafood, like scallops, like shrimp. She's like, I can't stand the texture. The taste is fine, but I just can't do the texture. And the one that we were both like, oh yeah, was bananas. Can't do it. I hate bananas. I don't like the smell. I don't like the taste. I don't like the texture. It's just a no. It's a no for me. If you're out there and you were like a banana fiend, then forgive me, we're different. But I hate bananas with a passion. There's a whole story around that, which maybe I'll tell and I'll weave it into one of my episodes here. But yeah, can't do bananas. Okay, so I've digressed a lot. Sensing the subtle stimuli. Those senses that we have, again, taste, touch, smell, hearing, sight, those can all be hypersensitive. Another example with I believe it's olfactory. I get gustatory and olfactory confused because that's taste and smell. But the one that is smell, people like me, highly sensitive people, my sister, we are very chemically sensitive. We cannot stand the smell of fragrances. And I want to just put out a big public announcement out there right now that fragrances are the death of us. So if you are wearing perfume, if you have synthetic fragrances in any of your personal care products, in any of your laundry detergent, please, 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 with a living passion that I have, please get rid of it. Synthetic fragrances are horrible for you. There is a documentary on HBO Max, I believe, called Not So Pretty, and it will explain all of that to you and how bad fragrances are. So please, please, please go watch that. It will change your life. Those of you who are HSPs, who have a sensitivity with the sense of smell, get rid of all the fragrances. You will thank me 100,000 times over. I promise. We're all very actually chemically sensitive to it. If you have been immersed in fragrances for a very long time, then you are probably numb to it. But once you get rid of it, you will notice a big difference if you go back to it. So this is everything from A to Z, from laundry detergent to dish soap, hand soap, shampoo, conditioner, face makeup, lotion, even fragrances in the car. Like getting in an Uber is the death of me and my sister. Like we avoid Ubers and Lyfts at all costs possible because there's so many fragrances and it makes us so sick. Like my sister will get migraines. I will get very nauseous. We'll both be tired and sluggish and sick feeling for days and days and days. Okay. So you could be very sensitive to fragrances as well. This is also a good thing in the sense that if you're smelling something pleasant, like the fresh cut smell of grass or flowers that are on a path, or potentially even your partner's pheromones, you might be even more sensitive to those things. And that is fun. Like you can play around with scents and fragrances that are naturally derived and that are in nature. Like when I go to the mountains and I smell fresh pine, oh my gosh, does that revolutionize my whole world. I am like a totally new person. So I have an essential oil of pine, and I asked permission, but I do take sometimes branches, like tree branches from the wilderness, and I put them in my bedroom so that I can smell pine. It has this way of relaxing me and of making me feel more connected to nature and more connected to myself. So there are positive things about this, okay? I don't want it to all seem like doom and gloom. But your sensitivity to smell can be a superpower. I also find that my sensitivity to smell can be very nostalgic. Like if I was so used to smelling something years and years ago and I haven't smelled it in a long time and I smell it again, then all of those memories just flood back to me, and it's really powerful and very cool. Okay, so this sensitivity to stimuli, or sensing the subtle stimuli, can apply to people. It can apply to your environment. It can apply to really anything that exists in your perception. So again, this is so high level. There's so much more to go into, but I really just want to empower you with some of these big high level topics. Okay, so you might be asking yourself, like, what are some other practical things I can do, Sadie, to support me if I'm an HSP, or to support my partner? So these are some that I've talked about before. I'll go through some that I've mentioned and also some new ones. One, I really, really want you to, and I invite you to start giving yourself some alone time to process, whatever that means, whatever that is. And when I say alone time, I mean also away from your phone. So that means disconnecting, putting on airplane mode or do not disturb, turning it off and putting it away from you, going on a walk, sitting in your car, or going on a drive, going into nature, to a park, on a hike, whatever it is. Have some alone time to process. Without stimulation and without guilt. Okay, that's a big one. Second suggestion I have for you, an invitation, is to clean up your environment. If your house and your car are messy, so is your mind. We have the ability to project our internal world externally and vice versa. So what we see outside of us is really what's going on inside of us, right? To a certain degree. So if you want to help clean up your mind and your brain and feel less overwhelmed and less stimulated, get rid of some stuff. Third one is to start a journaling practice where you're allowed to express, where you're safe to say and think anything that you want. Sometimes HSPs need that space to be able to just be who they are and not feel like there's any judgment or anyone to tell them no or that they're wrong, and to just feel accepted and welcomed. So if you start a journaling practice that allows you to do that, you might find that there's more space for you to feel more accepting and in love with yourself, not in a narcissistic way, but in a healthy self-love way. Okay, the fourth one, you might not like this, and you may or may not take me up on the invitation, but it is to take a break from social media for at least a week, 7 days. Do a 7-day challenge. Either delete all your apps or move them into a folder like many, many, many screens away if you have an iPhone, and just take a break. Just don't do it. If you have an addiction to it, this is even more a sign for you to get some separation from it. What I'm inviting you to do here is not only to just take a break from it, but notice if you feel less tired, less anxious, less depressed, less overwhelmed, less overstimulated. So this is really a way for you to be able to gauge if social media is a source of all of those negative emotions for you. And if so, then you can start developing more of a healthy interaction with it and a healthy relationship with it. Like for me, I have all of my social media apps, like 3 screens on my iPhone away, and I only go to it if I absolutely need it. I find now that if I go onto a social media app, I'm already instantly overwhelmed. And I'm like, oh my God, this is too much. I can't handle this. So if somebody wants to send me something, I'll look at it. But other than that, I'm not much of a consumer. I have definitely moved into a producer, sometimes even not even that, because I'm like, oh my God, it's still so overwhelming. But try it, take a break for at least a week. Notice if some of those negative emotions go down in intensity. Okay, the last one, I've already hounded this home, but read Dr. Elaine Aron's book, The Highly Sensitive Person, and concurrently, The Highly Sensitive Person in Love, which really helps you with relationships. Highly, highly, highly recommend her. She's a genius. Her writing is beautiful. I'm so grateful for her. I have felt so validated from her finding this information for us and really putting it out into the world, being brave. Her and her husband, I've wanted to meet them really badly, but maybe someday. I just am so deeply appreciative of all the work that she's done to bring this to light for all of us. So that's about all I have for us around HSPs today. Again, I wish that I could go into so much more depth, but if you want to get even more resources and more support, again, feel free to head on over to my HSP course at findinghomehealing.com/course and see if it suits you. It's a really beautiful resource, in my opinion, to help people. I've had lots of clients take it. They've been really supported by it. And if you would like to have a one-on-one session with me, that's totally cool too. You can also go schedule at my website, findinghomehealing.com. And I'd love to just support you if that's what you're looking for. I hope this has been really supportive to you today. We've talked a lot about what it's like to be an HSP, the questions that you ask yourself, some stories of mine and what my experience of being an HSP was and is, and some anecdotal stories around clients. I really hope that this has been empowering for you and very validating at the very least. I hope that you've taken away certain things that you might be able to integrate into your life and into your routine or into your knowingness about yourself that helps you bring you closer to unity with yourself. I am wishing you and sending you so much love, lots of big hugs. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.